It's the Monday Morning Show. Today is November 13th, Friday the 13th, 2020. And what better day to talk about Season 2 of DC Home than on Friday the 13th? Yes, this is the episode in which I give you all the inside dirt on DC Home. Welcome to Inside DC Home, Episode 5. The elevator pitch for DC Home is the lives of people impacted by Washington's politics who also live in DC. And while Washington certainly hasn't changed much, the DC part has proven to be a plastic concept. At the end of last season, DC came to be known as DC Home Storage. I wonder where DC will pop up next. The most important element, of course, has always been the people. I didn't spend a whole lot of time designing the characters. They came from my life and my experience, and I started them off as fairly middle class. Their family had experienced a tragedy, but there was no reason why they couldn't continue fairly comfortably. That is, until Trump shut down the government last year. I couldn't have predicted that the government shutdown would close bars around the nation, especially in D.C. I made a decision then that no national tragedy should go unfelt by these characters. They are the proxy for the American people. And so if bars were closing down, Sherry and Sean and old Herbert would not live the comfortable lives I had set out for them. It was June of 2019 when I put them into a kind of housing that turned out to be very temporary, DC Home Storage. And then I had a break. From June of 2019 to January of 2020. The new year passed, and I had to ask myself, returning for a second season, what was I in for? What would a second season hold? After the tragic loss of the bar last year, I decided, well, there's this old saying, if you want to make God laugh, make a plan. And I decided that 2020 would be a comeback year for Sherry and Sean and the folks of DC Home. To start, I wrote in a love interest for old Herbert, Miss Alicia. I decided that it was time Sean had a love interest as well, which was supposed to be Daisy. And I gave Sherry a job which introduced my favorite character of Season 2, Alan Oswald Watts. I want to tell you, I had plans for Alan Oswald Watts. A no-rent Rush Limbaugh would have been perfect for years of jokes about the Republican Party. The character had fire, he was angry, he was a lot of fun. Season 2 started off pretty slow. The first 4 episodes were basically Trump episodes, and I could see the second season being an indictment of Trump's horrible policies. And then COVID came to the party. And this started out as yet another failed policy, a series of failures on Trump's part. I started out talking about how the disease would impact the children our nation still holds in cages, like animals. Those children were still far away then, but it didn't take too long for us to realize that COVID wouldn't stop with them. Once everyone had to stay home, I had all of my folks lock themselves up into DC Home Storage. Imagine yourself writing a story that takes place in DC. A nice little story about a bar owner and her nephew and the schizophrenic down the block. Now, imagine a plague. It descends upon DC, and your story no longer makes sense without the plague built into it. I never wanted to tell stories about the pandemic, but I knew that Nothing fell under the umbrella of the lives of people impacted by Washington's politics who also live in D.C. than a pandemic horribly mismanaged by the folks in D.C. The executive branch run by an orange-faced nincompoop Republican. The legislative branch throttled by a turtle-faced nincompoop Republican. And a judicial branch packed to the gills with nincompoop Republicans. Who could possibly be at fault? But since I don't write the stories in advance, I don't plot them out, and I try to keep the details fluid until I actually sit down to write them, because we've all seen how far planning gets me. I found myself at the mercy of the news cycle, and every time I attempted to write some escape from this nightmare for my characters, the Republicans made things worse and worse. Americans died by the thousands, killed by the policies of the Republican Party. In 3 episodes since May, I actually finished the script before realizing I had to scrap it because some new information made my attempt to rescue these poor characters artificial, inauthentic, inappropriate given the severity of the situation. And so, despite my many attempts to say that she was fine, or that she was sick but getting better, or that she was doing poorly all season until a miracle recovery, the character of Miss Alicia had to die. How could I have let her live given the tens of thousands dying all around us? Alan Oswald Watts had to die because he was horrible. And I don't know what makes so many Republicans seemingly immune to this pandemic, as if they are somehow more toxic than any plague. But short of Herman Cain, karma has been taking it very easy on the Republicans, is all I'm saying. Karma has been stuck in IKEA or something. Karma is not going to get all 5s on its next performance review, if you get my meaning. And Alan Oswald Watts was a great character. The AOW to AOC, one of the Republican Party's dogs that they like to kick around. I think we've all seen how they do that to their own. He held the possibility of redemption and all those jokes. But how could I allow Alan Oswald Watts to live? I think the season suffered the most during those episodes when I felt it necessary to speak directly to a situation, instead of talking about it through the characters. I released These Americans Who Hate Our Democracy back in May, long before we had any idea about what the Republicans would do post-election. When I told my COVID-19 story, my plan was to take DC home in a very different direction, if not for the fact that COVID had made its way into my house. And then Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. My policy toward editorializing has been from the start not to do it unless something earth-shattering occurred. I don't know about you, but my world was shattered so many times this year that the phrase became meaningless. I was so distraught by the election, how so many people could vote for a man who bragged about torturing children, and on and on and on. It was unfathomable to me. I wrote an episode called The America You Want to close the season. It was very patriotic, which was surprising coming from me. I recorded it, I edited it, I mixed it, and very nearly uploaded it which is when I realized that I couldn't release the America You Want. I couldn't release the America You Want because I was so focused on America that I'd forgotten about Sean and Sherry and old Herbert. It's not a great sign as a writer when you forget your characters. And so I decided yet again to start all over, the fourth time I'd done that this season, and write an entirely new episode. Which leaves us at the end. And I thought the end of last season was dark. Last season found the gang moving into a storage unit. But by the end of this season, they were even denied that. I don't know what will happen to Sherry and Sean and old Herbert. Presently, it's about all I can do to keep them alive. DC Home will be migrating away from Washington, D.C. in time. But I feel there's still so much left to explore in D.C. now that it looks like we'll have a new president instead of the same old coup. My hope is that next year is a rebuilding year, but you never know what the Republicans might do to ruin Sherry's chances, to deny Sean the possibility of a bright future, to cast old Herbert into the shadows lest his mental illness drive down property values or something. As always, I end this season hoping for the best for all the folks at DC Home, not only Sherry and Sean and old Herbert, but Tony as well, and Daisy. Maybe they'll return next year. Maybe they'll find an America that is more fair, more honest, more decent. Nearly half of us voted for Trump. Republicans are still elected in droves. They're still threatening the future. Nothing has changed that. Only the players have been shuffled around. The game remains the same. Small changes sometimes take a while to add up before they can be seen as obvious or inevitable. And so I leave you now, as I leave you at the end of every episode, with my hope for the future and for us all. It doesn't change because Biden was elected. It doesn't change just because Trump has been embarrassed. Until January, then, probably sometime after the 20th, be good to yourself, be kind to others, and let's make this world a better place.